Have you ever believed the loudest person in the room is the strongest? The truth might completely surprise you. There is a kind of power that doesn't shout, doesn't demand attention, yet changes everything in its path. Are you wasting energy trying to explain yourself to people who were never meant to walk with you in the first place? In today's world, many people confuse noise with power. They assume the loudest voice wins the debate, the boldest statement secures the victory, and the person who speaks first takes the lead. But life has taught me a deeper truth, and maybe it's time we all paused and listened a little more closely. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need to fight for attention. It doesn't need to show off. When power is genuine, it enters the room silently but shifts the entire atmosphere. Silence, my friend, is not the weakness of the voiceless. It is the strength of the wise. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly who they are and who they belong to. It's the kind of strength forged through storms. The kind that doesn't need to scream at the wind because it knows who calms the seas. Think about Jesus. When he stood before Pilate, when he was accused, mocked, insulted, and spat upon, he didn't argue. He didn't fight back. He didn't raise his voice to prove himself. He remained silent. Not because he lacked power, but because he had already won. That silence thundered louder than any spoken defense. That silence was power. There will be moments in your life when the wisest and strongest thing you can do is say nothing at all. Not because you lack the words, not because you don't know the truth, but because the moment does not deserve your energy. It doesn't deserve your peace. You don't need to explain your calling to people who weren't there when God called you. You don't need to justify your path to those who were never assigned to walk it with you. Silence is not weakness. It is a response. It is the response of someone who has grown. Someone who is no longer triggered by criticism or provoked by provocation. It's easy to react, but it takes discipline to stay still. It's easy to argue, but it takes true character to walk away and let God speak on your behalf. When you choose silence, you're not ignoring the storm. You are trusting that the storm doesn't get the final say. You're not letting people walk over you. You are allowing God to lift you above the noise. And that makes all the difference. Because if you speak at the wrong time, you might delay what God is trying to do through you. But when you stay silent in faith, you give God full control. And let me remind you, God never loses control. To the one listening right now, you don't need to raise your voice to raise your value. You don't have to argue to be understood. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is remain silent and let God be your defender. Let your actions speak. Let your growth speak. Let the fruit of your life do the talking. You see, some of you aren't tired because you're on the wrong path. You're tired because you're carrying too many conversations that were never meant for you. Discussions, debates, and defenses you were never called to entertain. You're drained not because you're weak, but because you keep responding to things far beneath your purpose. Not every situation deserves your voice. Not every insult needs a comeback. Sometimes, silence is the only way to keep your spirit pure while the world throws dirt on your name. And let me remind you, God hears what they say about you behind closed doors. He sees who's smiling in your face but turning against you the moment you walk away. But if you stay quiet, if you refuse to lower yourself to their level, God will take care of it. Oh, yes, He will. And He won't do it in secret. He'll prepare a table for you, not just anywhere, but right there in the presence of your enemies. And guess what? You won't need to say a single word. Your silence will speak louder than anything you could say. It will be your vindication. It will be your strength. There's a deep peace that comes when you finally realize you don't owe anyone an explanation for the blessings God placed on your life. They may question how you got there. They may wonder why doors are opening for you. But they weren't there for the long nights you cried. They didn't see the sacrifices you made. They didn't witness the battles you fought in secret. So why waste your breath trying to convince them? Let them wonder. Let them talk. While they gossip you grow, while they slander you soar, while they watch you walk. Because if you can master the discipline of silence, you'll walk into rooms your enemies said you'd never enter. You'll receive blessings they swore you didn't deserve. And when that day comes, don't clap back. Don't throw shade. Don't say, "I told you so." Just smile. Just keep walking. Because that's what the silent do. They don't announce victory, they live it. So today, make that decision. Stay silent. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Not because you're afraid, but because you trust the one who fights for you. Not because you have no words, but because you know who speaks on your behalf. Be silent and watch what God does next. Because sometimes, in this life, it's not about what you say, it's about what you surrender. There are moments in life when God calls you into silence and not to punish you, but to prepare you. He gently whispers, "Step back, quiet your thoughts, just trust me." It might seem counterintuitive, but the truth is, God often works most powerfully when we speak the least. We live in a noisy world. Everyone's talking. Everyone's posting. Everyone wants to be seen, to be heard, to be validated. But listen, heaven doesn't respond to noise. It responds to faith. And real faith? It doesn't always speak. Sometimes, real faith simply listens. It kneels in silence and quietly prays, "God, I trust you even when I don't understand." There are blessings that haven't arrived yet, not because you're unworthy, but because your spirit is too distracted to hear his instructions. You can't follow divine direction if you're too busy filling the room with your own opinions. Let me tell you something important. Some of the biggest breakthroughs you've been praying for are waiting behind a quiet heart. Not necessarily a quiet life, because life will always be in motion, but a quiet heart, a heart that trusts, that listens, a heart that doesn't try to rush God, because it knows his timing is always perfect. When was the last time you sat in complete silence? Not scrolling, not planning, not talking, just being still in the presence of God? Some of the most powerful moments I've had in my journey with the Lord didn't come through the noise of shouting or the beauty of worship songs. They came in stillness, that sacred hush where the world fades and your soul leans in. That's where God whispers the next step. That's where he corrects what pride wouldn't let you hear during your arguments. That's where he begins to heal what the noise tried to hide. You see, when you're silent, you're not walking away from the battle. You're stepping into God's presence. And you're saying, "Lord, I don't need to fight this my way anymore. I'm done trying to fix what's out of my control. I surrender it to you." And when you get to that place, God begins to move in ways you could never imagine. He opens doors you didn't even knock on. He clears paths you never saw coming. He brings peace to places where you thought anxiety would drown you. But it all begins with silence. It begins with trust. Some of you, you've been talking too much to people and not enough to God. You've been explaining, defending, venting, complaining, trying so hard to make others understand what you're going through. But people can't fix what only God can heal. They can't carry what only God can lift. And the more you keep running to the noise, the longer you delay the answer that only comes in stillness. There's a reason why Jesus often withdrew from the crowds. It wasn't because he was tired of healing. It wasn't because he didn't love people. It was because he understood something we often forget. More often than not, when God responds, he responds with silence. You see, every time you respond to something that doesn't serve your purpose, you pay a price. You pay with your energy. You pay with your focus. You pay with your time. And the truth is, some of us are spiritually drained today, not because we're doing too much for God, but because we've been giving too much attention to things that never deserved it in the first place. We've allowed the world to pull us into battles we were never assigned to fight. We've turned our peace into a platform for arguments, our hearts into targets for other people's wounds. But hear me. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Not every accusation deserves a rebuttal. Not every situation needs your voice. Some things only require your silence. Because silence is a boundary, and boundaries protect what is sacred. And you know what's sacred? Your purpose, your calling, your relationship with God. When you respond to every offense, every whisper of gossip, every post meant to provoke you, you're handing over the peace that God gave you to people who didn't earn it and can't protect it. That's not wisdom. That's self-sabotage. There comes a point in your walk with God where you don't stay silent because of who they are. You stay silent because of who He is. Because you've learned. The battle isn't yours. The burden isn't yours. The outcome isn't yours to control. Your job is simple. Stand still. Hold your peace. Let the Lord fight for you. There's a beautiful verse that says, "In quietness and trust shall be your strength." That's not just poetic, it's practical. When you stop chasing the noise, stop trying to explain yourself, stop reacting to every push and pull from the outside world, you discover something deeper within. Strength, clarity, and peace. And that peace doesn't come from your surroundings. It comes from your surrender. I know, it's not easy. It's not easy to stay silent when you're misunderstood. It's not easy to hold your tongue when someone's lying on your name. It's not easy to walk away when you know you could prove your point. But listen, God isn't calling you to win arguments. He's calling you to win the war within. He's not asking you to be right in their eyes. He's asking you to be righteous in His. That means you don't have to explain why you walked away from certain people. You don't have to justify why you're not responding to every message. You don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your peace. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is smile, say nothing, and just keep walking. Because your silence is your growth. Your silence is your healing. Your silence is your strength. So let them talk. Let them assume. Let them misunderstand. Because the truth is, they talked about Jesus too. And yet, He fulfilled His purpose. He still rose. He still changed the world. And He did it not through arguments, but through obedience. Not through noise, but through presence. And if He could remain silent in front of His accusers, fully knowing who He was, so can you. You don't have to defend yourself when heaven is already defending you. You don't have to react, especially when your reaction could cost you your peace. Just because they're loud doesn't mean they're right. And just because you're quiet doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes, silence is the loudest declaration that your spirit belongs to God, not to people's opinions. You want to grow? You want to live in peace? Then protect your energy. Guard your mind. And be very intentional about what deserves your voice. Because your voice is powerful. And whatever is powerful must also be protected. Be silent and let peace become your greatest weapon. There's a reason God tells us to be still. Not just to stop moving, but to quiet the noise within our hearts and minds. Because silence is not just the absence of sound, it's the presence of trust. It's saying, "Lord, I don't know what you're doing right now, but I believe you're doing something good." And it's in that kind of silence that strength is born. We get so busy talking, worrying, complaining, trying to figure it all out, that we forget God already has the answer. We think if we say more, plan more, stress more, maybe something will shift. But faith doesn't grow through noise. It grows through stillness. It grows when you stop asking, "Why?" and start saying, "I trust you anyway." Real trust shows up when you can't see the way, when everything around you is dark and uncertain, when prayers seem unanswered and the path is unclear. That's where faith begins to move. That's where silence becomes power. Not the silence of despair, but the silence of confidence. The kind of silence that says, even if I don't understand, I know who holds tomorrow. God doesn't always explain himself. He doesn't always give you the details, but he does promise his presence. And sometimes, he's just waiting for you to stop talking long enough to feel it. Because you can't hear the whisper of the Holy Spirit when your mind is filled with fear and your mouth is filled with complaints. But if you can calm the storm inside, you'll begin to realize he's been there the whole time. Some of you right now are walking through a season that doesn't make sense. You're trying to trust, but nothing seems to be moving. Nothing is opening. Nothing is changing. And you feel the panic rising. You're tempted to go back, to compromise, to say something, do something, anything to force movement. But sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Just stand still. Just trust. Just be silent and let God be God. Think of the Israelites standing at the edge of the Red Sea. The enemy closing in behind them. A wall of water in front of them. No way forward, no way back. And what did God say? Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. He didn't tell them to build a boat. He didn't tell them to run. He told them to stand, to be still, to trust. And the moment they obeyed, the sea parted. That's the kind of God we serve. The kind who makes a way where there is no way. But he doesn't always move when we speak. Sometimes he moves when we stop speaking. When we stop panicking. When we stop trying to stay in control. When we finally say, God, I surrender this completely to you. You can't hold the pen. And ask God to write your story at the same time. At some point, you've got to put it down. You've got to say, even if I don't see it, I'll trust you. Even if I don't hear you, I know you're near. Even if nothing seems to be changing, I believe you're working behind the scenes. That kind of trust, quiet, deep, and unwavering moves heaven. It's easy to say, I trust God, when everything's going right. When doors are opening. When blessings are flowing. But what about when the door stays shut? What about when the answer is delayed? What about when all you hear is silence? That's where real trust is tested. And that's where silence becomes your strength. Because trust doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits quietly, humbly, without needing to know the timeline, without demanding an explanation. It just waits. Because it knows God is too faithful to fail, too good to forget, too wise to make a mistake. So don't let the silence scare you. Don't let the delay make you doubt. God hasn't left you. He hasn't forgotten you. He's building something in you. He's teaching you to walk by faith, not by sight. He's teaching you that you don't need all the answers. You just need Him. And one day when the silence breaks, and the blessing comes, you'll look back and realize it was worth the wait. You'll thank God that He didn't let you rush, that He didn't answer too soon, that He held you in the quiet until your heart was truly ready to receive what your words couldn't carry. So trust Him. Trust Him in the silence. Trust Him when it doesn't make sense. Trust Him when everything in you wants to panic. Because sometimes the loudest faith is the quietest heart. Be silent and let your trust speak louder than your words. There comes a time in your life when God begins to shift the people around you. And if you're not careful, you'll misinterpret the shift. You'll think it's punishment, but really, it's preparation. You'll feel rejected, but in truth, you're being protected. And in moments like these, silence becomes more than a posture. It becomes your survival. Because not everyone who starts with you is meant to finish with you. Not everyone who applauds you in one season is meant to walk with you into the next. And sometimes, the most painful part of growth is outgrowing the people you once thought you could never live without. But hear me, you don't have to announce it. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to defend it. Be silent and let God do the separating. Some relationships are seasonal. Some friendships were only meant for a chapter, not the whole book. And when God starts turning the page, it's not your job to hold on to characters who don't belong in your next scene. You don't need closure when you have peace. You don't need revenge when you've been released. You don't need to chase people who walked away when God is calling you forward. But the flesh wants answers, doesn't it? We want to know why they changed, why they left, why they lied, why they hurt us. And we want to speak. We want to expose the betrayal. We want to confront the dishonor. We want to explain ourselves. We want to defend our name. But friend, silence is not weakness. Silence is wisdom. It is trusting that what God reveals in time is far more powerful than anything you could say right now. You don't need to broadcast the pain. You don't need to drag their name through the mud. Because God saw it all. He heard the conversations behind your back. He saw the doors they tried to close. He witnessed the manipulation, the gossip, the sabotage. And he also said, "Vengeance is mine, not yours. Not your mouth, not your emotions, mine." And when you hand the battle over to him, silence becomes your weapon. There's a kind of silence that speaks louder than words. A silence that confuses the enemy. A silence that says, "I know who I am. I know whose I am. And I don't need to fight for a seat at any table, because God prepares one for me in the presence of my enemies." When you walk in that kind of silence, you're walking in divine confidence. Not because you're perfect, but because you are protected. Sometimes, the people who walked away had to leave so you could hear God's voice more clearly. Sometimes, the betrayal had to happen so your heart could be purified. Sometimes, the silence was necessary because their noise was drowning out your discernment. And when God removes someone from your life, He doesn't need your permission, only your obedience. We don't always understand it in the moment. We don't always see the purpose in the pain. But one day, you'll look back and realize God was saving you. Saving your time. Saving your destiny. Saving your soul. Some of the people He took away weren't just distractions. They were delays. And in His mercy, He made room for your purpose to breathe. So don't try to reopen a door that God closed. Don't try to explain yourself to people determined to misunderstand you. Don't try to hold on to those who already let go. The more you try to defend yourself, the more exhausted you'll become. But when you stay silent, when you surrender the pain, when you trust God to handle what's behind the scenes, He begins to do something beautiful. He restores you without your help. Healing doesn't come when you win the argument. It doesn't come when you post the truth. It doesn't come when they finally say, "I'm sorry." Healing comes when you can sit in silence and still feel the presence of God. It comes when you can walk away without bitterness. When you can bless them in your prayers, even if they cursed you with their words. That kind of peace, it's not man-made. It's God-given. And maybe you're there right now. Maybe you're trying to make sense of a sudden separation. Maybe your heart is aching over people you deeply loved. Maybe you feel tempted to speak up, to clear the air, to prove your innocence. But let me tell you, there's more strength in your silence than in your defense. Because the God who sees in secret will reward you openly. And when He does, no lie, no rumor, no betrayal can stop what He has planned for your life. So be silent and let God remove who He needs to remove so He can make room for what He's about to do. There's something sacred about silence when it's rooted in surrender. Not the silence of defeat or fear, but the kind that says, "Lord, I've said all I can say. I've tried all I can try. Now I'm letting go. and I'm letting you take over. That's when miracles start to happen. Not when you fight harder, but when you finally lay your weapons down. Life will stretch you. It will test your patience. There will be moments when everything feels delayed. Your dreams, your prayers, your healing. And in those moments, silence becomes the soil where patience and trust grow. Because sometimes, God's greatest works aren't found in the noise of progress, but in the quiet of waiting. You may be praying for something right now, and it feels like heaven is silent. No sign, no answer, no change. Just because you hear nothing doesn't mean God is doing nothing. His silence isn't absence, it's preparation. God often does his deepest work in the quiet. He shapes character in the waiting. He tests motives in the stillness. He purifies desires in the delay. And here's the truth. Waiting in silence doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing the hardest thing of all, trusting. It means showing up every day with faith, even when there's no evidence. It means choosing hope, even when doubt is screaming louder. It means resting in the promise, instead of wrestling with the process. When you learn to be silent in the face of delay, you begin to walk by faith, not by sight. You stop needing instant results. You stop craving applause or recognition. You stop needing everything to make sense, because your confidence is no longer in the outcome. It's in the one who holds it. That kind of silence isn't passive, it's powerful. It says, I don't have to rush what God is doing. I don't have to beg for what's already mine. I don't have to force open a door that isn't ready yet. If God said it, I'll stand on it, even if I have to wait quietly in the hallway for a while. And let me tell you, the hallway can be holy ground. That space between promise and fulfillment is where your roots go deep. It's where your pride dies. It's where your faith matures. Some of the most anointed men and women in Scripture didn't meet God on the mountaintop. They met him in the silence of delay. Joseph in the prison, David in the wilderness, Moses in the desert, even Jesus in the tomb. They all experienced seasons of silence. They all endured divine delays. And yet in every story, God wasn't late. He was right on time. Because heaven doesn't move by your clock. It moves by his purpose. We often mistake silence for punishment. But sometimes, silence is God's mercy. Because if he gave you what you wanted too soon, it could destroy you. If he opened the door before you were ready, it could become a burden instead of a blessing. God loves you too much to give you something you're not prepared to carry. So he waits. And in the waiting, he calls you into silence, not to frustrate you, but to strengthen you, to stretch your trust, to align your heart, to bring you to the end of yourself, so you finally depend on him fully. And when the time is right, when your spirit is steady, when your heart is pure, when your silence is turned into surrender, he moves. And when God moves, it won't be because of your striving. It won't be because of your effort. It will be because he ordained it. Because you waited in silence, and he honored your trust. I know it's not easy. I know it hurts when everything feels still, when prayers go unanswered, when dreams feel like they're slipping away. But listen to me. Your silence is not wasted. God hears the cry of your heart, even when your lips never move. He sees the tears you cry in secret. He counts them. He keeps them. And he responds, not always in your time, but always in the right time. So be still. Be silent. Keep showing up. Keep believing. Keep surrendering. Let the silence teach you how to listen, how to wait, how to trust. Because one day, the silence will break. And when it does, you'll look back and realize, God was working the whole time. Be silent and let your surrender make room for God's supernatural timing.